Well, welcome back from lunch. It's like the nap time, so I'll try to keep us motivated here, right? So we've had a good morning, and we're moving into the afternoon, and I'm going to share with you for the next little session here for a little bit about loving your neighbor, because we're still here, and I'm still coming back to it. So I'm going to make you guys all stand up. Everybody stand up. Okay, everybody has neighbors, right? So think about your neighbors. Who are your neighbors? We all have, somebody has a house nearby you, right? At least one. Maybe you live in the country. It might be a couple miles away. And so think about your neighbors. If you don't have a lot of neighbors around and you spend a lot of time at work, you might think about, keep in mind instead your neighbors at work, maybe who's at the next desk or cubicle or office over. So I'm going to ask you guys some questions. And if you cannot answer the question yes, at some point you can sit down. Does that make sense? So I'll help you out here. So first of all, stand if you have neighbors. Okay, everybody's still standing. We're good. So if you don't have neighbors, sit down, but nobody should be sitting. Okay, so if you have said hello or met at least one of your neighbors, you may remain standing. Okay, good. Let's say if you know the names, at least the first names of several, many, the majority of your neighbors that live next to you, you can stay standing. If you don't, sit down. All right. Do you know the careers or the jobs of your neighbors? Their favorite sports team, something about that, their kids' names, their pets' names? If you don't, sit down. It's okay. No shame. Okay. If you have invited your neighbors over to your house for dinner and had them in your home and gotten to know them, you can stay standing. If not, have a seat.
If we've invited, but they have chosen not to
I'll count that. You can stay standing. All right. How about if you have been invited into your neighbor's home and had dinner with them and their family, you can stay standing. Everybody else sit. We're slimming down. We're slimming down. If you can say that you know the hopes and the dreams and the fears and what motivates your neighbors, stand. Anybody else? Okay. Okay. Can anybody say that they've done that with all of their neighbors? With everybody that lives at home? Okay, we got some real friendly people. All right. You know what? Let's round of applause for everybody on that. So in order to love our neighbors, it kind of helps if we know our neighbors. Am I right? If you want to love somebody, you have to interact with them. You have to get to know them. So go back to the simplicity thing of what we're here to talk about. The first commandment is loving God. We've kind of been talking about that. You got to spend time in relationship with God. And to love your neighbor, you really need to spend time in relationship with your neighbor. Now, that could be your literal neighbor. It could be other people that you come in contact with. We're going to talk literal neighbor, though, because why not? Jesus says to love our neighbor. Have we ever thought about that as loving your literal neighbor? Because we take Christ with us everywhere we go. And if we really love people, we want them to experience the hope and the peace and the joy that Christ gives. So, of course, we want to share that with everybody around us. So, we did that little activity today to just kind of get a feel for how much we spend time in relationship and getting to know our neighbors in our literal neighborhood. And I want to talk a minute about a little resource. I know many of you have come to things I've done before, and I've handed out Love Your Neighbor toolkits and things like this. So there's a resource that's a part of that. So it might not be brand new to everybody, but I think it's helpful as we talk about loving our neighbors. There's a book called The Art of Neighboring. And I've seen this kind of done different ways, but it's a good book. It is on your resource sheet, so you have all that. But the idea behind The Art of Neighboring, what they put forward as a philosophy is there's this 9-square grid, and they're all about loving your literal neighbors. So they've given you this resource that I use personally too, so I'll tell you a little bit about that. But the whole point is that middle house says you are here. So that's your house. And then the house, next to it's your neighbor on one side, on the other side, across the street, behind. If you don't live in a neighborhood, you might not have this 8 people or so living around you. So you kind of work with it. And if you want, you could use this as your desk at work, wherever you've got neighbors. So you put your name in the middle, and then you think about who are your literal neighbors. I have a magnet version of this on my fridge. I took a picture of it, but I didn't put it in my PowerPoint. And the idea of this is that you get to know your literal neighbors. I'll walk you through their process that they spell out in the book just briefly. That there's really actually 3 stages or three parts to this process of getting to know your neighbors with the intent to be in relationship, and if the opportunity presents itself and Spirit moves and is at work, that you have the opportunity to share your faith and to share with them. So the very first thing is getting to know the names of people. So that's pretty easy. First and last name, sure, at least their first name. And you know what, I have a magnet on my fridge, like I said, and we have a little dry erase marker, and I have written down the literal names of my neighbors, because it's hard to remember people's names, right? We've been talking about that. And I meet a neighbor, and then it might be like a week goes by before I see them putting their trash out, and I can say hello again, and by then, I've forgotten their name. I mean, it 10 seconds, and I've forgotten it, let alone a whole week. So, and I might have done a little Facebook looking to confirm that I actually know people's names. We have a neighborhood Facebook page, so I get on, I want to make sure I'm right. But I would recommend, this tool is meant to be used so that you can get to know people. So we have this on our fridge. We write down the names. I write down their dog's name too, because the neighbors are always out walking their dog, and you're pretty friendly, because if I'm like, oh, your dog's Penny, okay, we're good. I can remember that. So I look at it. If I forget somebody's name, I can pop into my kitchen and pull it up and look. So the idea behind it with the first thing is to spend time learning people's names. And you can kind of think of that as your homework assignment. So once you got that grid filled out, it's like, okay, good, I've got their names. But we don't want to just stop with just the surface level relationships. We want to go deeper, right? So the second, letter B, and if you can write real small, you can fit all this in your neighborhood magnet box maybe, is learn some piece of relevant information, some sort of data or fact about the person, not something you can figure out just by standing in your driveway. If I look over and they've got a Colts flag hanging in their front yard, they probably like the Colts. Okay, so that maybe doesn't count if they've got it there. But something that you actually have to engage in conversation. So homework assignment number 2 is engage in conversation with somebody enough you can just learn a tidbit about them. This is more than what kind of car they drive. It's more what's something that they do. Maybe what they do for their job. Maybe they love to ski. Maybe they love reading books. Whatever it might be. Learn a fact about them. Something that you can have sort of a common interest or a conversation about, and say, hey, have you been skiing lately? Hey, have you, how's the sports team doing? That's a great way to connect with people. So that's the second little tidbit to learn about people. And then the third layer is actually to go a little bit deeper and build that relationship where you have some in-depth information about somebody. Something you only know after connecting with somebody. And I think that's something interesting to think about in any relationship. We spend a lot of time where we say, hey, how are you? Good morning. How's life? Great. How are you? Good. And it's hard to go deeper. It's hard because it's hard for us to go deeper. We don't want to share our fears and our, dreams and hopes with people, because that makes us vulnerable. And it's hard for, other people to share that too, unless there's an element of trust there. So relationships do take time. But then the goal with this grid is maybe that third layer is, as you build a relationship with somebody, you're really digging into that little bit more in-depth conversation, get to know somebody a little bit deeper, dig into their who they are a little bit more by being nice. Don't pry it out of them or anything. The whole point with this whole process in this neighborhood grid is to make it easy for you to get to know people and to just be a resource as we build relationships. Because we talk about building relationships, and I think the idea is it should be an easy, simple thing. But the reality is that relationships are kind of messy, and it's difficult, and it does take some work. You actually have to practice at this, practice saying hello, practice greeting people in the church. Well, you can work on practicing that in your own neighborhoods as well. And the idea from this book is that we're really moving from stranger to acquaintance to relationship. And when the end goal is to share our hope that we have found in Christ, certainly you can share it with a stranger, but it's probably not going to get paid attention to, right? You can share it with an acquaintance, and maybe there's a better chance of listening. But when you're really speaking into somebody's life, when you have a relationship built there, where you have trust, where you understand what a person's going through in their life, when you know their hopes and their dreams and their fears and things like that, the gospel comes alive then. We have purpose and meaning behind how we deeply care for this person, and we've shown that, and we want them to have what we have. So the whole idea is this grid and learning your literal neighbors' names and a little bit about them is a tool that helps equip us as we go out to build relationships and to share about Christ. So I do have some magnets, a few available if anybody wants them. I'll dig those out before you go so you can actually practice this at home. So I want you to take a minute and talk to your neighbors and think about how can I share love as a neighbor? So in your context of home or work or wherever it might be that you have neighbors, maybe what's something that popped into your head while I was going through this about what's one small step when I go home in my neighborhood that I can do differently to show love? So discuss. Okay, we're going to wrap up our conversations so we can keep moving. I can tell you guys have lots of ideas of ways that you can start loving your neighbors in a more practical, simple, real way. So I do want to point out a few resources. The book, The Art of Neighboring, is a good book. Talks about all this and how to use it. They go into more detail about block parties and different things you can plan and do to engage your neighbors and your neighborhood. It's a great resource for a church to kind of work through, or you as an individual, whatever you might want to do. I do have a few magnets up here. First come, first serve. Take them. You can order them on their website too. And it's super easy. Pop it on your fridge. Maybe kind of around the corner in case your neighbors come over and they might be a little weirded out, but that's where we keep ours, on the side, kind of next to the pizza menu and stuff. But go ahead and take some of those if you want. And every church, I think, in the West District should have a Love Your Neighbor toolkit, which has the magnet and some other resources in there, but I did bring 5 of them with me. So
For a nominal fee.
For a nominal fee of nothing. So if you don't have one, or if we run out, let me know. I've got more I can mail to you. So it's got some resources for your local church to use to sort of engage more into practically loving your neighbor. And I put a little picture up here. Actually, Megan showed me these. There's different little things that you can just buy or have, like little scripture cards or encouraging cards. The picture up there is from Blue Chair Blessings. They have these cute little scripture cards because I think women really like this stuff. But anybody, they make manly ones out there too. Just something that you can have that as you're loving your neighbor, you can just hand somebody something or tuck that in, or just take time to share an encouraging word from Scripture in the midst of loving your neighbor. I think one of the biggest things is that we offer hope in the midst of these relationships. I kind of keep coming back the same thing over and over. Galatians 6:2 says, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." Why are we loving our neighbors? Because we all have burdens, and people might be showing up at our door on Sunday morning with those burdens. They might be just sitting in their living room next door to you with those burdens. And our hope, my hope, I think our hope as Christians is to be able to help carry those burdens, to walk alongside people in the midst of crisis and grief is such a critical moment in people's lives when they're going through something. Everybody's going through something. Everybody's got something going on. We just need to be aware of what it is and be able to be present in those moments in their lives to walk alongside them. So a few resources to help in those moments of grief or crisis or disaster. Stephen Ministry. I know that's a training that's offered. Does anybody in their church do Stephen Ministry? We got some. Okay, so raise your hands high, because these people are going to be your resources that can talk to you about that. You can also become a church that trains people in Stephen ministry. And what that does is prepares people to help walk alongside those who are going through grief in difficult times, and it gives them kind of tools to equip, which that's really what we're all doing as Christians, right? We offer hope. We walk by those who need hope. So Stephen Ministry is one way. Another thing that I work with is disaster response, and we offer a training called Connecting Neighbors, and that is really a training for any church. You can do it yourself. You can invite somebody in to do a training, but it really helps you prepare your members of a congregation for disaster and prepare your church for a disaster if it hits your community. But it also helps you have the resources. So if a flood or tornado or something came through your community, how can you love those people in your community? How can you be prepared to be a resource and to be a place of hope, whether you become a shelter or whether you are just kind of walking out your doors into your neighborhood and shaking hands and saying, how are you? Is everything okay? That training is available to be a resource to you and your church to equip you that in the time of disaster, that you can be present and be there. I have copies of that on USB drives. If you'd like one to take home with you, you can do that. But it is available. And all of these resources, again, are on your resource sheet that I gave you at the beginning. So take a minute, talk to your neighbor again. Who in your life needs some hope? I think we all have somebody that just needs that follow-up, that encouragement. Is there somebody that comes to mind that might be going through a crisis moment and needs hope? Take a minute and share that, or write it down on your paper or something. So discuss. All right. I hate to wrap up your conversation so quickly, but we have more things to work through. So I want to take a minute and share with you some of my favorite scripture in the form of Legos, because I have a boy who loves Legos, and I love Legos, honestly. I got some as a Mother's Day gift a couple years ago. So what better way to share one of my favorite stories from the Bible than in picture form with some Legos. So one of my favorite stories that I think encapsulates this is from Exodus chapter 34. And so we have Moses. Moses has gotten the 10 Commandments, came down from the mountain, smashed them because he was mad. And then God, who's represented by the white bearded man here, says, hey, Moses, go back up on the mountain. We're going to try this again. So cut out a couple more stones and head back up on the mountain. So Moses does that. He grabs his 2 stones and he heads up on the mountain. Yep, there we go. He's climbing up, very determined. And he says, God says, I'm going to meet you up at the top of the mountain. I'm going to meet you there. You're going to be in my presence up there. And so Moses heads up. And he gets to the top of the mountain, and God gives him the commandments, and he chisels them out. And you can kind of see in the background there's a big cloud that represents the presence of God. So while Moses is up there chiseling the commandments out, he has this crazy experience where he's in the presence of God. And it's just him and God hanging out, and it's a really powerful moment. So Moses comes back down. And this says, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the covenant law in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. So his face is glowing, which I feel like this is the best way to show them. So as the story continues, Moses comes down, and then when Aaron and the Israelites saw that his face was radiant, they were afraid to come near him. So clearly he's shining and bright. And it continues, but Moses calls out to them, and all the leaders of the community came back, and he spoke to them. And afterward, all the Israelites came near him, and he gave them the commands the Lord had given him on Mount Sinai. But the next slide is the one that I think is the most interesting. It makes me laugh. But when Moses finished speaking to them, he put a veil over his face. But whenever he entered the Lord's presence to speak with him, he removed the veil until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelites what he had been commanded, they saw his face was radiant. Then Moses would put the veil back over his face until he went in to speak with the Lord. So I think this is an interesting story. Moses is glowing so brightly, he has to put a veil over his face. And it says he continues to do this. So I don't know, is this going on for a couple days? Is this a couple of weeks? Is this, I don't know how long, but he keeps, spending time with God, and he comes out and he glows so brightly, he has to cover his face. And I think we kind of like laugh, which is good because I think it's a weird story. But when we spend time with God, we kind of want to be like Moses and we glow, right? Have you guys ever met someone that just radiates God, that you know they are spending time with God, and that it just like it's on their face, it's on the way that they act and react to people? I see so many heads nodding. Take 30 seconds and share that with your neighbor. Who is it? Okay, I'm going to bring us back. I know you're just starting to share. And I love it because when I've asked this question before, and when people start talking about that person, their face lights up too, because God is so working in their life that it even spills out into ours. There's a story that I think also illustrates this in the children's book of Virtues. There's one of those stories that you read through. There's a story about a little girl, and her grandma lives in this house, and the sun never shines in her room, and it really bothers the little girl. And so the little girl's trying to like capture the sun in her dress and run in and take it to the grandma. But we'll get to that in a second. But the girl's like, I can't capture the sunlight, and the grandma says, well, it shines through your eyes and in your hair. And so it reminds me of that story of Moses. You know, when we spend time in the presence of God, we radiate God, don't we? You can just tell, like, I feel it when I spend time in the presence of God. So when we're talking about loving our neighbor, that's really it. We're spreading sunshine. That's kind of the term I have used, and some of you may have heard me use that before, but I like to think about it as spreading sunshine. So a couple years back, my son and I embarked on a journey. I work with mission stuff. You can't go on a lot of mission trips with a 2-year-old. That's kind of difficult. So we decided to do a little mission project that we called Spreading Sunshine. And so we picked a week in the summer at home, and he helped out. So he did painting. He does what a 2-year-old, he's 4.5 now, so he would have been 2.5 then. So he did what he does best. He painted some things. We made some little cards with sunshines on them, put a little verse in there about, may the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face to shine upon you. And we took those cards out to a nursing home and delivered those, because my husband's a pastor, so we had a lot of people we could go and deliver them to, and we spread sunshine. And my little 2-year-old boy, he is a bundle of sunshine, so he definitely spread some sunshine. We also baked cookies. We took those around to police, fire, people in the community. We went into the utility building, and we actually had somebody follow us out crying because she was so thankful and felt just honored and appreciated, because I don't think most people going in to complain about their water bill are the most kind and loving. So we spread sunshine to her. We also did things that he understood. We baked some spaghetti and took it to some people. We went to the store and we bought a bunch of like diapers and wipes and things and delivered them to a community organization that helps mothers and things like that. And of course, we ended the week by celebrating with milkshakes, because you can't have like a week of mission work without celebrating spiritual discipline, if you remember. So we celebrated with milkshakes at the end of the week. And what I love about it is not only was it good for me, every moment wasn't total sunshine, but it was it was a moment where we could share the joy of Christ wherever we went. And it has sort of become a way of life for my son. Just a couple days ago, I said, hey, we got to go spread some sunshine. And boy, he knows what that means at our house, that we're going to go out and we're going to visit people and we're going to be nice and we're going to love them. And so it's really a way of life. And I put the little gears up here because I think that's one of the things, is one of the biggest resources that God uses to share his love is you. It's you, it's me, it's all of us. And I think sometimes we take that for granted and forget it, that the way that God shows love to other people, there's a lot of ways, and he can do it any way he wants, but he chooses to do it through you and through me. There's a verse in 1 Peter that says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. If we're going to give an answer for the hope that we have to be hopeful. We have to be joyful. We have to be full of sunshine, spreading that around in order for people to come and ask, hey, what's that thing you've got that makes you so hopeful? And we get to tell them about Jesus. But we have to be hopeful ourselves and spend that time in the presence of God so that we glow. I think really, I boil it down to one thing: stay curious. If we're not curious about God, if we're not curious about others, we're not going to be doing anything new or different. So I challenge you to stay curious, ask questions, seek after God, and seek after other people. And to me, that's foundational in loving your neighbor. So we're going to take a minute and check in here with our friends to see how they're coming along in our video with the process of learning to love their neighbors. And then Jim will share with us after.
Hey, John, glad to see you around here.
Hey, Bobo. What's a good word, buddy?
Hey, does your wife know you were over at that divorcee's house today?
Man, you know she's not even a divorcee.
How do you know that?
Well, my wife made cookies for her and the kids, and you know what she found out?
Oh, what?
That right before they moved here, her husband got deployed to Afghanistan.
Oh, man, that's tough.
Yeah, it was. So when her parents came out to help her move, and they had to get back because they got jobs, and so she's here alone. She's feeling overwhelmed. I just thought it's the least we could do to help her with her yard.
Wow. Husband in the military. That makes sense of the flag. 2 little kids. That's got to be really tough. But you better watch out. They're going to expect you to do it all summer.
Yeah. You know what? We did offer to take care of it for the summer. It's the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah? That neighbor thing.
What is your deal? You never used to be this way, man.
I know. My wife Julie says the same thing. I've just gotten tired of giving all the time, getting nothing in return.
What are you talking about?
I used to help others out all the time, but I got cancer, remember?
Yeah, I remember that, Bob.
I thought the kids would come around, but they were too busy. I acted like it didn't hurt, but it really did.
I'm sure that did hurt, Bob.
And then there's the pastor. I've done so much for that church all these years. I thought he would be there for me. He came by once, but...
Now, hold on. Yes, Bob, he came by, but do you remember what actually happened? He came by, he was going to anoint you with healing oil, and what did you do, Bob? How did you act? What did you do?
No, nobody's putting that voodoo oil on my head. The only oil this guy's going to use is WD-40.
Bob, and you are shocked that he didn't come back.
Yeah, Julie wasn't too happy about that one either.
Well, but do you remember though? Do you remember who was there for you, Bobo? Do you remember? It was let's read the list off, your Republican, non-Christian, Cardinal fan neighbor. It was this guy.
Yeah, John, you were there for me all the way through.
Well, that's right, Bob. And quite honestly, I didn't have a reason to do it other than the fact that, well, Dad, that's what my father taught me to do the neighborly thing. And man, it was terrible when you got cancer. I mean, I remember that well, and but part of me thinks that because of that, didn't we get to be really good?
Whoa, no hugs!
Come on, Pops. Look, all I'm saying is, people get put into our lives for different reasons, all right? And we never know where that stuff's going to go. But all we did was we saw that you and Julie had a need, and we just wanted to be there for you. But now we know that if something happens to me or my wife or our family, I know you guys will be there for us too.
Yeah, John, we would be there for you. It is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But no man hugs.
No man hugs, Bob, or voodoo oil.
Good. We'll see you later.
See you, buddy.
So, well, look, I've given you a lot of resources Allison has. Weren't these great resources on neighboring? Give her a hand. This is fabulous. Now, friends, don't be shocked. You can do this. All these things that we've been talking about. Don't be shocked. It just takes intentionality. And none of this takes brilliance. It doesn't take being a super evangelistic Christian. It just takes you, being a neighbor, being a friend. And you'll see it makes a great difference. So I know after lunch it's a little bit, everybody's a little tired, right? I mean, this just happens. Are some of you in churches that are a little bit tired? Sometimes. I mean, it's just energy levels drop. So we found there are two ways to re-energize a church. So one is put this stuff in their communion cups. Practical ideas that you get. The other is just create a great culture that is clear. My mama in Illinois taught me this, that I've lived my ministry by. And now if you're taking notes, this is the most profound thing I'm going to say all day. Here's what Mama taught me. It's easier to pull a rope than push a rope. It's easier to pull a church into its future with a compelling vision and providing resources and tools to model what you want to look like in the future than to stand up and push the church, because that creates resistance. I just commend Ann and John and the people who put this together and other kind of training events. These are great ways to catch a vision, a compelling vision, see what can happen, and pull your church into its future. Now, I spoke this morning about how to make connections when you couldn't remember names, and I appreciated Allison reminding us that names are important. So don't misunderstand. It's really important that you do everything you can to learn names, because identity is important. But don't let not remember the name stop you. But remember your identity. What we're talking about is, what's the identity of your church? I learned this really, the first President Bush, was a Texan like me, and his mother, his mother was in a retirement village in Houston. And President Bush was there on a campaign trip. He tells this story in his autobiography. It's a delightful story. And he's there. The motorcade is driving along the loop around Houston, which is a big city, and the loop goes a long way. And he gets information that he has 15 unaccounted for minutes, extra minutes. And the president looked over to Barbara and said, "You know what? We've got 15 minutes. I'm going to go by and see my mother." And she said, "Well, George, you're the president of the United States. You can't just change everything and go see your mother." He said, "I am the president of the United States, and I am going to go see my mother." He radios ahead. Because you get this picture, the whole presidential motorcade going around the loop, they exit off and they head to this retirement village. Now, I guess you have them the same in Indiana as we do in Texas, where you have retirement villages and people who, because they have different levels of care, they're in different buildings. Now, his mother was in the building, the front building, least care. But because they had the whole motorcade, they had to clear out the back parking lot. Everybody had to park in the back parking lot and go through the building that was the most care. You with me? Now, you've been in these they're wonderful facilities, loving people. And the folks that are there, they are the most elderly, most fragile, often in the hallways in wheelchairs, heads drooped down. You've been there, you know what I'm talking about? So just get this picture. The president walks in that room, in that building, the whole entourage. I mean, there's 40 or 50 of them. And he walked in and he just happened to, one of the sweet ladies just looked up like this and made eye contact. And President Bush, forever the campaigner, couldn't resist. He walked right over to that lady, stuck out his hand. He said, "Good morning." He said, "Do you know who I am?" And she said, "Well, no, but if you ask at the front desk, they could tell you." Identity is critical. What's the identity of your church? Just imagine if your church was known as the church of the first 10 seconds, where new friendships are being made. Just imagine if your identity was nobody leaves without being spoken to. Just imagine if your identity was this is a church that is intentional about going out and reaching new people for Jesus Christ. Just imagine if the identity of your church was clear to everybody, that you're a church that's out there to meet your neighbors, to serve your neighbors, to love your neighbors. Just imagine what your identity could be. Friends, I hope when you leave today that you and your team will get together and be intentional about developing a clear culture that expresses your identity. Am I making sense? Now, I have a little handout for that. Can we get this handout out here? This is just an example. And, I don't want to take up all of our time with this. Here's what this is. This is my team put this together based on things other churches have told us over the years in our work. And you'll see this is called Beatitudes to Serve By. So I guess I'm just going to have to bluntly ask this question. Do you now in your church, if you have staff, do you have a staff covenant that is written down and clearly articulated? And does that covenant extend to all your elected leaders in the church? Am I making sense? Churches settle and they forget to do this very basic thing. Friends, remember what we talked about complaining and criticizing? Here's culture. Here's what your church's organizational culture is. Culture, now let me see if I can explain this. My co-author of my book, Fiona, I met Fiona because I went down to Love Field. Their headquarters is in Dallas. And in Love Field, they have a place called, at the Southwest headquarters, they have what they call Love University. And it's the place where all new employees learn, and that great Southwest Airlines culture, it's what it's known for, it's great culture, is embedded into every individual. And I met Fiona there. I was able to go and hang around Love University because I'm a member of my church. So Fiona and I developed, how do you apply a great culture like Southwest Airlines culture to a church? So everything we teach is that culture. You may not recognize it's that culture applied to a church, all based on intentionality and hospitality. So at Southwest Airlines, they have 3 culture words. Now, when I say words, it's really phrases for them. But we coach pastors. I coach a lot of pastors, and we coach pastors to get away. And you can hear this, lay folk. We say, pastors, get away and think. Just get 24 hours away to think. This is not a prayer time. It's not a reading book time. It's a thinking time. Now, it may seem like that's asking a lot, but Jeff Bezos says he gets away 10 days a month just to think. And he's done pretty well. Just think. Think, what did God see in me to call me into ministry? What is it about me that God needed? What could I, as a pastor, what could God leverage my personality and strengths and come up with what you want to see as the culture of your church? Now, I'm not going to try to tell you all of this. I just want to give you this is the way we do it. So Southwest Airlines, here are their 3 culture words. You might find this interesting. So first of all, a warrior spirit. If you work for Southwest Airlines, you become a warrior. You say, I will fight any battle. I will do anything to win the loyalty of just one customer. Anything. And you'll see that happens. I mean, I've been all over the country in airports, and if the baggage breaks down, everybody there, it's all hands on deck. You do anything you can. You're a warrior. You're in battle to fight against apathy for Southwest Airlines. Second is a servant's heart. Not only are you a warrior, but you do everything you do because you're a servant. You just love serving people. If you work for Southwest, your job is secondary. What's primary is, do you just love serving people? Pretty good for churches, don't you think? Third, may not surprise you, is a fun-loving attitude. They just want to have fun with what they do. You see, culture is not what you do. And in the church world, every church does about the same thing. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, really, they do about the same thing. Culture is how you go about doing what you do. That's where you create your identity. So take a look at this Beatitudes to Serve By. This is not brilliant. This is just a compilation. If you think it would be helpful, you've got it digitally, or you can get it digitally from John, your DS, or Ann, and just take it. But maybe your leadership group in your church, instead of spending your time talking about the next problem, think about that future. What is the attitude with which anybody who's going to serve in any elected position would sign on to? Am I making sense? So I'm just leaving this as an example for you. And if it's helpful, take it. If not, come up with something else. But have something that any prospective new staff person, even if it's part-time or child care worker or administrative assistant, anybody, because you don't want somebody working at your church that doesn't share your culture, that doesn't reflect your identity. And everybody who's elected to some kind of a position in the life of the church. You know, just because somebody has had experience in the building trades doesn't mean they'll be a good member of the Board of Trustees. Just telling you, right? What makes them a good member is they buy into the culture. They understand this building is a mission statement to reach people for Jesus, right? So come up, am I making sense? Just come up with something. And so while you're reflecting on that, take a look. This is one of my favorite videos.
Why do we drive ourselves as we do in our furious race these days to conquer outer space? Are we not perhaps forgetting inner space? Shall we find the true meaning of life by fleeing from it? This is lost to us, and this we should strive to recapture, a simple, innocent pleasure. And so I say to you, dear friends, relax, slow down, take it easy, watch your hurry.
Well, hello. Real pleasure.
Oh, Dr. Breen, your sermon had such a wonderful lesson for us.
Yes, sir, you really hit the nail right on the head there.
Yes, sir, that's one subject you just can't talk enough about, sin.
Yes,
Will you be around?
Ah, come on, that's funny. That's also the way an 18 to 40-year-old individual who's never been a part of a church, who has been hurt by the church, that's how they see your church. Now, it isn't that way, but that's how they see it. We have got to be sure that when somebody does wander into worship, maybe driven by that human hurt, remember I told you about? Or maybe somebody's coming to worship tomorrow because their neighbor's kid's being baptized and they're just there to support him. You just don't know why somebody comes on a Sunday morning. Friends, look at me please. Don't waste this opportunity. Somebody at your church tomorrow may need you to be the bridge over which they walk to meet Jesus Christ. Because you see, in days gone by, when most people my age were going through the seminary and through ministry, we kind of evaluated the excitement of a worship service by the power of the spoken word. And that's very important. Then we had a generation where the excitement of a worship service was that great band. And that's very important. But today, people measure the experience of worship, not the elements of it. The experience. From the time they get out of the parking lot, till they walk through the front door, till they sit down, and something happens in there. And when they leave, they are measuring in their head the experience, not just the elements. Am I making sense? You are the experience. You see, worship has to be, the experience has to be exciting, and that means the people have to be exciting. Are you with me? There was an old-time evangelist who used to hang around these parts by the name of Vance Havner. And he used to say this. He went to too many worship services that started at 11 o'clock sharp and ended at 12 o'clock dull. He also, one of his things he was famous for, he said, the only thing worse than the blind leading the blind are the bland leading the bland. Now, Vance Havner was talking about the message. But we know that's changed. It isn't the message today, it's the experience of the people. So what if your identity is this church is on fire because we are met with great hospitality? That this church is a place where I don't have to worry about going in and know that there's underlying anxiety and angst, but it's a place of positive, uplifting strength and support. What's your identity? You get to make it. It's being a good neighbor. It's a good neighbor to the people that just come in. If you've got a neighborhood church or a regional church, it doesn't make any difference. Churches today grow in a different way than they used to. Even when I was pastoring, just 10 years ago. Now, I was in a fast-growing metropolitan area. It was not strange to have 25, 30 people join on any given Sunday. That used to happen in our world. But today, churches don't grow like that. Even the church I pastored. Today, churches grow one person at a time. And they grow because that one person forms a relationship, makes a connection. You see, the growth engine of churches today, it's the people. On fire. Clear who they are. Excited to be at that church. Realizing that on a Sunday morning, if you're a member of a church, if you're a leader, you're there to be a producer of the ministry of that church. Make sense? Allison, thank you again for the neighboring. That was really, it was new to me. That was great. I'm going to steal that. I may steal you. All right, I think it's break time. So somebody want to give instructions about break? Or do you need instructions? All right, break until 1:45. Now, let me just say as I'm leaving, I'm going to do a session at 3 o'clock and on some deeper elements of hospitality. I don't know how many of you will be there, but what we've shared today, resources, techniques, don't be shocked. You can do these. So I want to ask you tomorrow, don't wait till 2 weeks from now. Start tomorrow at your church, practicing this 5-10 link, okay? Amen. All right, take a break.